All right, guys, let's talk. We got a lot to get into today. The college football playoff. Is it worth being part of the college football playoff? I could put a better tournament together with the SEC. Clint and I will talk about that. The transfer portal is hot as well. Some guys going. Bama in the mix for some guys coming in. Expect a lot of that. We're going to do it right here on Cover Crimson, brought to you by mybookie.ag. All right, that's Clint Lamb. I'm Mick Gillispie. Good to see you guys. Clint, yesterday was a big disappointment. And maybe I did it to myself, but I was blindsided. I just did not see a scenario where Alabama didn't get in. And I honestly felt like when you looked at the resume, when you looked at the interest that the team brings to a TV game, when you look at the field, that you couldn't go with SMU over Alabama because I felt like you had too many of the cupcakes already in there. And I was 100% wrong. Felt like there was just a lot of pull from the politics of it, despite Bama being ranked ahead of SMU in both polls. Somehow SMU got in and Bama got out. And honestly, I've been pissed off ever since.
Yeah, a couple of unfortunate situations. Number one, it was the way that the game played out, which is incredible because they give SMU a lot of credit for making a comeback. It kind of ignoring that they were playing terrible football for just over a majority of that game. And the way that we said going in, the one thing that the most concerning thing that could happen would be a close Clemson victory. And you couldn't have gotten any closer other than it like going to overtime and it becomes like a 2-point shootout back and forth, kind of like the Georgia Tech, Georgia. There was nothing. I mean, it was supposed to go to overtime. Clemson gets a fortunate kickoff return. They get one play to kind of get into field goal range. It wasn't even really that kicker's range. And then he ends up hitting, what was it, a 55-yarder, 50? I don't think it was like 59, but it was 55 plus. I know that 100%. So from that point, the narrative starts to become, okay, what does it mean for the future of conference championships if you leave SMU out? And that is where Alabama lost the money battle. And I talked about this yesterday. I hate to be repetitive, but I think it is such a crucial aspect to this. Alabama had more eyeballs are going to want to watch Alabama versus Notre Dame or Alabama versus Penn State than watching SMU against either one of those two teams. There was nobody, I don't even think SMU fans are going to deny that. But and that was a huge thing as far as branding and kind of the pull, and that kind of has helped Alabama in the past. But when they started this narrative that conference championships are threatened, and in hindsight, Rhett Lashley, I didn't like how he handled it last week as far as bringing it up constantly on every radio show that he possibly could or TV show. But him hammering that point home as much as he did, in my opinion, in a lot of ways, it probably saved SMU because they're viewing it and saying, okay, if we might get the short term positive side of the money aspect if we put in Alabama over SMU as far as this one singular game. But if all these teams start opting out of conference championships, you got all these TV deals and those make the TV networks an absolute killing. You're sacrificing a lot more in the future for one singular game. So in my opinion, that ended up hurting Alabama's chances. And I think that's ultimately they'll come up with their reasons. They came up with their reasons last year. They could have justified putting Florida State over Alabama. They didn't do it. And a lot of people, because felt like it was because of the product and the fact that they had lost Jordan Travis and that Florida State just hadn't looked very good since losing him. And the draw, as far as the money they can make off of putting Florida State in, wasn't worth putting an undefeated conference champion in. And so this year it's kind of the same situation. Normally, a big brand like Alabama would hold an advantage there, but in this situation, I think that actually ended up working against them. But I think we can also all admit that conference championships at this point mean very little. They can play them up or hype them up all they want to. Some SEC teams or SEC fan bases and some SEC head coaches were pushing for not having to play in that game. And, obviously Rhett Lashley's going out there and he's making the same claims. He's not talking about how much of an honor it is to be in the ACC for the first time and to immediately make it to the conference championship. The only thing that guy could focus on is we shouldn't be punished for losing this football game. If we really had the option, we wouldn't be playing in this football game, is essentially what he was saying. So, you're heading in that direction anyway. So I think it was a mistake. I think anybody that is rational understands that Alabama is the better team. They are ranked in the top 11 as far as, where they are viewed as far as their team, but yet somehow they are not in the college football playoff amongst the top 12 teams because we decided automatic qualifiers or auto bids was a good idea. The entire thing's broken and it's got to be fixed sooner rather than later.
Yeah, look, I agree with that assessment. I'm surprised that the TV networks would allow the lowest draw in one of the worst conferences, TV rating wise, SMU, who no one ever watched them until that championship game.
Because they were worried about Alabama standing, by the way. They drew the eyeballs that they did for the sole purpose of how does it affect everybody else.
Right.
No one cared about watching SMU.
No.
No one cared about watching this Clemson team. They're not all that great. No. It was a huge. You got every Alabama fan that could get to a TV was watching that game for the sole purpose of wanting to know if it was going to help or hurt their chances of getting into the playoffs.
Yeah, and then when it was all said and done, you're looking at it and you're going, they're not going to give the ACC 2 bids, and you look at the fact that SMU had no wins over anybody good, but that's what we're seeing with all these teams. Arizona State, come on, man. Kansas State and Kansas are your big wins. I mean, and then you're looking at Indiana. Somehow you floated through that schedule playing one game and you got your ass kicked. Them being in there, and like you said yesterday, and you're right, like they were in there and it wasn't even a question. The wins and losses don't matter as much as the body of work that got there, because if it doesn't, then the SEC needs to back out of this and go do its own thing. Because Clint, I'm telling you right now, I could put a better, and this is not hyperbole. I could put a better tournament together with the SEC's top 12 teams.
If you didn't have automatic qualifiers, Mick, you'd have Oregon, you'd have Georgia, you'd have Texas, you'd have Notre Dame, you'd have Penn State, you'd have Tennessee, you'd have Ole Miss, you'd have Alabama, you'd have Ohio State. You'd probably still have Indiana. You'd probably still have Arizona State, but you'd have South Carolina in there. I mean, and I understand that I just rattled off a bunch of names, and it's probably hard to keep up with all of them. But when you look at the branding there and the excitement factor behind those games, just by taking away the automatic qualifiers and how things probably would have worked out had you not had those, you're talking about a completely different look. As far as the excitement level, and Boise State fans are thrilled to be there. They'll be glued to the TV. They're hoping. I mean, Cincinnati fans were thrilled to be in the college football playoff a couple of years ago against Alabama. Right. And good for them for making it. But from an Alabama fan's perspective, from a college football fan's perspective, they can tell you all they want. If they're a fan of a team that really hadn't had a chance in the past, just to get that chance, they're willing to settle for less desirable games because of what that can mean for their own team. Mm-hmm. But when you start looking forward and actually paying attention to the game and who's going to be playing, I mean, you might watch it with the intrigue of, can a Cincinnati pull off this upset against Alabama? If they can do it, maybe we can do it whenever we get our chance in the future. But outside of that element or that aspect of it, most fans just don't really want to watch that game. It ended up being, I think, 24-7 or something like that. And it was exactly what we thought it was going to be, which was not a very fun football game to watch.
I mean, that to me, I'm looking at this and it's like, it comes down to you and SMU. I'm sorry, if they beat Oklahoma, it's the best win they have on their schedule.
Oh,
like,
yes.
If they beat Oklahoma, they're making shirts and buttons, and it's the biggest thing that's happened to SMU. And we lost to them, right? We got our butts whooped on the road at Norman. They didn't go to anywhere like that. We lost to Vandy. Vandy beats them too.
Oh yeah,
and Nashville, well, and then we lost to Tennessee. They lose to Tennessee too, but they don't win half the games on our schedule. And it's like, how are you going to punish? And why would Greg Sankey allow the SEC to put themselves in a position where you're giving other brands that aren't doing half of what you're doing buys and free paths into this playoff, and you got your 4th, 5th, and 6th teams are better than the first. We've got 6 and 7 teams in the SEC that are sitting at home right now watching teams that they'd probably be a 10 or a 14, 15 point favor over. Think about that.
I mean, and you're and just because you're a favorite doesn't mean that you'll win. I mean, obviously Alabama was big favorites over South Carolina. They were big favorites over Vanderbilt. So that would be everybody's counterpoint. I totally understand that. But at the same time, more times than not, it's going to work out the way it's supposed to, or it's at least going to be in that range. If you're a 24-point favorite, sure, you might not cover the spread. You might win by 20, you might win by 19. But normally, those are the kind of ranges that it's going to be in more times than not. And it is unfortunate. I will say, if you want to do a nice little troll game, let's hypothetically say Ohio State wins the national championship, which I don't think is likely. Their path is absolutely absurd. But if they do it and Alabama beats Michigan in the bowl game, Alabama should take a 2017 UCF route and claim a national championship for being the team that beat Michigan. At least just to piss everybody off and get this is purely a troll thing, but I think that would be absolutely hilarious because that was absurd. Auburn losing to UCF saying we deserve to be in, we didn't get our opportunity, so we're claiming it over a team that beat Alabama or whatever. I think it would be poetic if it worked out the opposite way.
They're not going to. Greg Burns, he's a classy guy. He put a statement out and basically said they ought to think about the Power 5 games that they've scheduled, and I think so too. Why put yourself at risk if this playoff with Boise State and Arizona State getting buys, and you look at their schedule. I mean, Boise State did play Oregon tough. I watched it. They're a good team. I'm not taking that away from them. But the rest of their schedule is a joke. It's a joke, man. Like, how can you, if you're Ole Miss or South Carolina or Alabama or, any other team that's in one of these big conferences, I mean, I guess, if you're in, it didn't really work out this way for the Big Ten this year because they were so top heavy. And that's why all of their teams at the top had great records because the teams at the bottom were so bad. Their conference isn't like the SEC. The SEC is wasting their time in this tournament because the internal competition is so hard to win week in and week out. You might beat Georgia and lose to Vandy because you're so banged up or it took so much energy to do it the week before. But I just feel like, what Burns said was like, hey, let's get rid of these Power 5 games. I hope they do something just to make a point. I don't think they will. And then, and I heard what Coach DeBoer said, and he's such a nice guy. But Alabama's got to put their foot down because they're too big of a brand to let themselves get pushed around like this.
Well, yeah. And I mean, the SEC, I don't think people realize how much power the SEC and the Big Ten have in this situation. A lot of these teams, if you're SMU, if you're Boise State, you could end up being not a little bit disrespectful to go as far as to say like D2 level. But if the Big Ten and the SEC broke off and they made like an AFC, NFC, NFL style of system, anybody that's not in that will be viewed as a secondary product. And you can get all these people, SMU just got to the ACC. They just became, Power 4 conference, Power 5, previously known as caliber as far as the conference you're in, and to immediately go back to being secondary to at least 2 conferences where you're kind of cut out and left out. Everybody wants to say, hey, we don't mind screwing over the SEC at all. But it's like when the SEC has this kind of power, because, and it's not, it's through not, they've put such a focus on the resources behind, football. It's they build facilities, they have, academic support, they pour, I know the Big Ten certainly does this too, as far as the NIL dollars, but as far as, the talent that comes to the SEC, whether it be coaching, whether it be player, you got them kind of ahead of the curve as far as, Kalen DeBoer bringing in a GM style guy like Courtney Morgan. That's something that everybody's going to start doing. It's going to become a commonplace, but they're ahead of that front. The nutrition, just all the resources and investments they make, it is positioned them where they are viewed from an NFL perspective, I mean, there's a lot of NFL evaluators, talent evaluators who are, they'll fully tell you the SEC from a talent standpoint, NFL talent standpoint, is just so far ahead of everybody else. I mean, obviously the Big Ten is in that conversation to an extent, but just really across the board. Like, you got Florida sitting there finishing at 7-5, and they got NFL talent all over the place. It's just the way that it's currently set up. The SEC knows, because they are in the SEC, how difficult the grind is. Anybody that hadn't experienced it, that starts to experience, they'll fully admit that. You got Caleb Downs going to the Big Ten and talking about how different it is as far as playing quality opponents. Now Alabama, playing in Alabama had them prepared. And this is the guy that's supposed to be going to the second version of the SEC, who's still saying that. What do you think if he would have transferred to the ACC, he'd be saying, or the Big 12, or, the Mountain West? So, I mean, no one wants to admit it, or at least a lot of people don't, but it is true. The SEC is far and away above everything and everybody else. The Big Ten is certainly up there in that conversation too. And it is those two and then everyone else. And, you sitting there trying to make things fair for yourselves, just so you can put more teams in or whatever, understand that the SEC and Alabama and its brand is not just going to lay down and take that lightly.
Well, let me ask you this, and I'm being serious here. Conference championship games are trash now. It's a waste of time. I think we've admitted that, right? And Notre Dame goes out, they make their own schedule, right? They're an independent brand. Bama's brand is just as big. Why do we need the SEC? I mean, why don't we just why? And I know that like we're locked in right now, but I mean, just like from a business aspect, if they can't take up for us when we clearly have a better argument to be in a tournament like this, when you look at the field and the games that we've played, commissioner can't help us. Obviously our people couldn't do any better. Why are we even in this? Why not go independent like Notre Dame? And hey, you know what? Look at the path Notre Dame has to get to the college football championship game. Like we could schedule all the teams that we want to schedule. I mean, I put on my Twitter one of these crappy schedules that these other teams are playing, and Bama wins every one of those games by 35 to 50 points, and they're in this, right? Clemson is the master of playing the weak schedule and getting into the tournament, maybe playing one or two games and then getting in and being fresh and winning championships, including 2 over Bama. What is it about the SEC that we have to stay in here long term if this is the formula that we're going to be in?
First of all, I'm going to make sure I'm giving the smaller conferences, not say smaller, ACC is obviously Power 4 still, but I'm going to give them credit for going when they do have teams that go out there and schedule really difficult opponents. And Clemson did that with Georgia, and that resulted not only on a loss but an ass kicking. Yeah. And that's why they were sitting with 3 losses. Otherwise, they'd be sitting, if they'd scheduled some cupcake, they'd be sitting there at 10-2 going into this weekend, and we'd have been feeling a lot differently about them. But you had that head-to-head matchup where you could actually compare the best of what the ACC had to offer compared to the best that the SEC had to offer, and it was like a 4-score difference. So, I do give them credit for that. You're 100% right. I don't think you can go here. The money that you bring in through the SEC is incredible. And one of the things that I think Alabama, at least compared to a lot of other programs, and whether it be some in the SEC, obviously some in the Big Ten, from the NIL dollars and the revenue that generates, is a little bit different. It's not going to be quite as much. They don't have, the backing in some areas, which they're absolutely working on that and doing a really good job as far as making up for that in a lot of other areas. But that's part of it. But, what I like about, I hate that we're arguing this. I hate that we're talking about the SEC should take away all these really good out of conference games off their schedule, because that was good for us, the college football fan, and anybody. This is good for the ACC fans. It's good for the Big 12 fans, the Big 10 fans. The SEC going out and playing. I understand Florida State wasn't that good this year. Let's say they would have lived up to their preseason billing and they would have been a top 10 team 2 years in a row. Alabama going to Tallahassee to play them next year would have been an incredible helmet game. It would have been fun. Everybody would have been hyped. We talk about these cupcake weekends, and you're looking around college football. It's not just what your team's doing. You're looking around college football, and you're like, man, nobody's playing nobody. There's no games to get excited about this weekend. And that's why I hate that they're, kind of in some ways backing the SEC in a corner where they either go that route or you do what I'm talking about. You kind of eventually break things off with the Big Ten. You take control. And once that happens, I don't know how exactly it will look, but if it's the AFC, NFC, NFL styled setup like it could be, you're getting good games every week. Even if Alabama's playing Purdue or something across the way, that's still at least, previous Power 4 and stuff. I mean, obviously there's terrible teams in the NFL too that really good teams have to play, but on a week in, week out basis, you never have the Mercers, you never have and I will say this too. I feel bad about taking so many shots at Mercer because they're a really good football team for their level.
Right.
They've been used as the example. I say, I hope you really like Alabama playing Mercer. I'm not trying to take shots at them. I'm just trying to make a point, and I'm being honest. But I mean, it would solve a lot of these issues, to be honest with you. And if everybody wants to play hardball, I mean, in the end, I don't think they quite realize how it'll turn out for them.
Yeah, no, that's it. And I agree with that. So it's either you do one of two things. Either you bounce from the SEC and you play teams like SMU and Indiana, who you would kick the crap out of.
It wouldn't be fun for fans at all.
Right. But they're undefeated right now, or they have one loss right now. I mean, we're so good. We belong in here. And I know that that there's this group of haters that are in those positions that are, pushing for this because they feel sorry for these little guys. ACC does not deserve two teams in this field. They're just not good enough. Okay. And if it was anybody, it should be Miami over SMU. SMU is not good enough to be in this field. They didn't earn it, and they got in because of sympathy, right? But I'm looking at it like you just said. Either we separate and let ASU and all these the SMUs and all these ACC teams, they can have their own championship of that level of football, and then we go and we play the Big Ten every year for a championship. Or let's get out of the SEC, not have to play 8-9 of these SEC games. If I'm Alabama, I'm pissed anyway. Why did Sankey put us with LSU, Tennessee, and Auburn when some of these schools have two cupcakes like Vanderbilt, where they get to play like a Kentucky and a Vandy every damn year? What that's not fair for us, right?
Regardless of what happened this year, because a lot of people will be like, well, Vanderbilt beat Alabama. So year in, year out basis is what you're talking about. I want to make that very clear.
I mean, but everybody else has give us Mississippi State, keep LSU. But they want to sell our brand and put us in a position where we play an NFL schedule. They did it to Georgia this year. Hey, Kirby, we've been running this for a while. We know all about this schedule. You guys didn't have this up until now. We've had it. Look at our schedule from 3 years ago. Okay? So you're sitting over here complaining. Alabama and Georgia get treated differently than Tennessee and Vanderbilt. And now we're sitting out here. We had a pretty damn good season. I get it. We didn't beat Oklahoma, but we played a gauntlet, and teams that played nobody are in the playoff, and we're sitting at home. We're not. We're going to play the old Outback Bowl against the 7-5 Michigan team when we would have had about a 5% chance to win the national championship, which is more than half of that field.
Well,
period.
And I will say one good aspect, and Michigan is so it's hard really finding a whole lot of reasons to be excited about the Outback Bowl, and I'm just going to keep calling it that.
Yeah, me too.
But Michigan lost to 4 playoff teams. They lost to Texas, they lost to Ohio State, they lost to Indiana, and someone else, Penn State, right? Yes, I believe so. Anyway, it's at very least 3, but I think it's 4. I want to say 4 of their 5 losses are to playoff teams. So even though they're 7-5, I think they're better than 7-5, even though they really have. I mean, they have a hard time completing a forward pass. So it's not a very fun style of football.
Look, the alternative was the Cheez-It Bowl against Illinois. F that, or the Gator Bowl, which I like. Jacksonville would have been a great trip, but I don't want to go watch us play Duke. So for me, that's fine. All of these bowl games are so irrelevant right now. And the next thing, Clint, and I know we're going to talk about the transfer portal. The next thing is to see who opts out of the game. But I don't know. We could sit here and talk about this, lament about how this college football turned out. But in a tournament where Arizona State and Boise State have buys in football, that just tells you all you need to know. that you got 4 teams in that tournament that played nobody. And beat nobody. They played teams and lost, but they didn't beat anybody. And that was valued more than going out there and playing a schedule that was top 15 and having tough games about every single week. And it's a shame. It's a shame on the tournament committee, but it's a shame on the SEC for agreeing to this bullcrap, because it's their job to look at this and go, hey, wait a second here. I was looking at this when they first started. I was like, this feels like charity. We're just trying to figure out a way to get teams that don't belong into this tournament. And then they kept selling us on, no, we're going to get more teams in. We got 3 teams in. We've always gotten 3 teams in. We'd have 2 teams in sometimes when they had 2 teams.
Yeah. I mean, and 2 out of 4.
Yeah, right. This is not good for us at all. So, I'm just curious to see how it's going to shake out, Clint. But I'm not happy about this field at all. The tournament looks weak.
I'll put it this way. When it's a 2-team playoff and you get an SEC team in, you got 50% of the teams. When it was a 4-team playoff and you got 1 out of 4, you got 25%, or you got 50%, or 100%, or 50% if you got 2 teams in. And sometimes those teams played in the national championship against each other, and it was 100%. But just getting into the playoff field, it was either 50% or 50% or 25%. This year with 3 out of 12, that's also 25%. So really, what did you see an increase in as far as your participation relative to the rest of the field? One thing about it, this is a big win for the Big Ten, because they are getting a lot more money for having 4 teams in than having 3 like the SEC. So they got to line their pockets. They already got a bigger TV deal, and they get to line their pockets. All their schools do with more cash flow because they got a 4th team in and the SEC didn't. So it is what it is, though.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk transfer portal. Lots going on. Kobe Prentice, Kendrick Law are leaving. Sorry, not that worried about it, Clint. You knew the guys that were leaving it during the season, the Hurleys and the Odoms, or Otis and Odom. I don't know. Just go through the list. I mean, and I'm sure it'll keep getting bigger, but I haven't had looked at this and seen any surprises so far.
Well, Danny Lewis was somewhat of a surprise, just because you're losing CJ Dupree, you're losing Robbie Oots. You got Josh Cuevas more than likely coming back. I would assume that he is. And, but he's not really a pure inline tight end type of guy. He's more of an H move tight end. And so you look at Danny Lewis and you say, man, you would have a really good chance of being, kind of that inline option for Alabama, being a starter. I really liked his game. I thought pass protection, when you would ask him to stay in, I thought he had shown traits throughout his, few years at Alabama. I thought run blocking traits as well. Thought he had some pass catching upside. Don't think he's a dynamic pass catcher by any means, but I really, liked his potential a little bit more so as a pass catcher than either Robbie Oots or CJ Dupree. So that one was a little bit surprising. But when you look at like Kendrick Law and you look at Caleb Odom and you look at Kobe Prentice, all 3 of those guys were a part of Alabama's wide receiver rotation this year. So people are going to see that and they're going to say, what's going on? Kalen DeBoer's offense, are people freaking out? Are they, panicking? Are they leaving? What's the deal? And it causes, once again, anxiety for fans. But when you start looking at it a little closer, first of all, Caleb Odom, I am a huge fan. I've been a huge fan. I've been very vocal about what I think he could be as far as kind of that big body receiver in this Kalen DeBoer offense. But here's what we know. He showed up as a tight end. He, was moved to wide receiver. That was the position that he preferred to play. And, he wants an opportunity to do pretty much exclusively that and kind of be a featured piece in an offense. I don't know that he was ever going to find that type of role. He certainly would have been an important piece for Alabama, if not in 2025, at some point in his career. But would he have ever been really like the guy or one of the top 2 guys? It's possible, but it's also very possible they never really broke, being just a really, really good number 3 who really provided a different element or different dynamic to the offense. When you look at, Kendrick Law, a glorified blocker, and granted, he was really good at it. And there were games, where he made a major impact. But when you look at how important that style of player was for this particular offense, and if Alabama continued to field this style of offense, I think a Kendrick Law loss would be a lot bigger. But, when you look at like Jalen Milroe and the fact that his legs, they're going to attack you out on the perimeter. You look at a lot of what Jam Miller did as far as his success, a lot of outside the tackle, off tackle stuff. A lot of his rushing success, his explosive runs happen in those types of situations. A player like Kendrick Law being that wide receiver 3, essentially being an extra tight end in a lot of ways because he's that good at run blocking, that was that helps so much with that style of offense. But if you are going in a different direction, Jalen Milroe won't be back at quarterback. You're going to be throwing the football around a little bit more, doing some different things, being a lot more versatile and diverse as far as your run game is concerned. You start looking at that wide receiver 3 and you're like, that's not necessarily the style of player that we need to have or really want to have. Maybe you want to have a different style, someone that's a much more effective, consistent pass catcher, really doesn't have to be a gadget style player, someone that can handle some volume if you need him to. So, I think from that aspect of it, it makes sense. Yeah, I totally understand Kendrick Law wanting to move on and maybe try to find a role somewhere where they can utilize his skill set to the best of his ability. But I also understand from Alabama's perspective, and I do want to remind people, all throughout fall camp, we were getting a lot of reports and seeing it some in practice, definitely saw it some on fan day, that it was Jeremy Bernard, Ron Williams, and Cole Adams running with the first team over Kendrick Law or Kobe Prentice. And, of course, that kind of changed once the season started. Adams dealt with injuries. That is a concern for him. But, Mick, I think that Adams is going to be a part of this offense. I think Jalen Hill coming back, when you've got, Ron Williams, Jeremy Bernard, you got, Cole Adams, and you got Jalen Hill already, you're leading your receiver group. You're going to have Rico Scott getting a lot of run with Hill and Adams out, probably against Michigan in the bowl game. And then you start talking about what they brought in as far as the big body guy and Derek Meadows, Latzir Brooks. We love him, talked about him a lot. You've got other guys in that wide receiver room. I'm not overly concerned, despite the fact that you're losing 3 guys who are a decent chunk of your rotation.
Well, look, I feel like when DeBoer took this thing over, he inherited a lot of these guys. Now he's had a whole year to look and see, who matches what he wants, plus personalities. The way that he does it is different than the way Coach Saban did it. So he's going to have to find people that are going to respond to the way that he wants things done. And if yelling at somebody and getting in their face and all that stuff is what somebody needs, it's just not going to work. So I think that's part of it too. But I'm curious to see kind of how this all pans out as far as the transfer portal. I know going out, we're losing some guys, but coming in, this is where DeBoer's always done well. So as disappointing as it is to see some of these guys leave, and you always worry about it, you don't want to lose Aaron Anderson and then see the guys got like a bunch of catches and making plays, and you had a spot for him. But like, as far as Odom goes, like, you getting on Twitter and complaining on Twitter, retweeting stuff, get out of here, man. We don't need that. We just don't need that. Like, we had another guy do that and ask a Jai Hall how his career's gone. Like, you want to be the guy, like Saban said, go out there and make the plays in practice and force them to put you in the game. So, like, that's it. But so I'm not that worried about it. Now, I wonder to myself, what things would look like for Alabama if some of the guys that they don't want to transfer start transferring. Are we going to lose Caleb Downs type talent this year? Are we going to get, or is somebody going to come in and pay Ryan Williams $5 million to leave? I worry about that. And the power of our NIL to basically hold on to the players that we want to keep, because that's a real possibility. I mean, we saw it last year.
Well, what was kind of crazy, if you're a Caleb Downs style of player, I understand that Nick Saban leaving would obviously cause concern. With Nick Saban being a defensive backs guy, there was, rumors or speculation that Downs was probably heading there anyways. Don't know if that would have happened, but I more so understood it. But like a guy like Ryan Williams, the thing about him is that he's clearly trending towards the NFL direction. Everybody sees the stupid amount of talent that he has. Everybody knows in this Kalen DeBoer offense the way that it's supposed to operate when Kalen DeBoer kind of has his guys and it looks the way that he wants it to. that it's going to feature you as a pass catcher, and you're going to have a lot of success. So it's like, as long as Alabama's paying you and paying you pretty well, someone giving you an extra $1 million to go somewhere where you don't know what the situation is going to be, you're kind of uncomfortable. He's an in-state guy. He wanted to go to Alabama. He's made friends there. He's been embraced there. It's like, for a little bit money on the front end, what are you potentially risking as far as potentially tens of millions on the back end? And I'm not saying that he would go somewhere else and he would fall off a cliff or something. His talent's too good. He's going to end up in the NFL. There's no doubt about it, barring any sort of catastrophic injury. But I do think that certainly, certainly could affect him to a point where it's like, was it really worth, making $3 million or $4 million instead of $2 million right now? I don't think he's that type of guy. I could be wrong. It's why I really haven't been worried about Williams. I think he wants to be in Tuscaloosa, and I think he's going to be well taken care of because he deserves it. When you start looking at, other receivers and stuff, one of the things that I do want to bring up with like DeBoer, he was forced. By the time he got named the head coach, the early signing period had already come and gone. The early transfer portal period had already come and gone.
Yep.
And everybody was able to pillage Alabama's roster for 30 days.
Yeah.
With Nick Saban retiring. So his way of offsetting a lot of the potential losses, was very limited at that point.
Yeah.
So he had to hang on, even they know they might not be a schematic fit or whatever. And he had to hang on to the Miles McVays of the world, every one of them, as much as he possibly could. Even though he wasn't really a schematic fit from a numbers standpoint, you couldn't lose a bunch of guys like that. Now that he's able to do his thing, he's brought in his style of players in this recruiting class from the high school level, and the fact that he's going to be targeting his style of guys a lot more so, not just that second window in the transfer portal, then, these guys that maybe aren't schematic fits, don't really fit where they're wanting to take things. It's okay to kind of let them go. Some of them might even be, kind of ushered out the door a little bit, saying, but some of them might not be guys that you necessarily want to leave, but there might not be a fit. And so you kind of let them go and try to find a better situation for themselves, but you have the ability to kind of counter that a lot better. And that is a huge difference between what's happening right now, in my opinion, compared to what happened a year ago.
We're brought to you by mybookie.ag, telling you guys that because we appreciate you guys and we appreciate them. I mean, they make this whole channel happen, but 300%, that's a lot, right? Deposit bonus for the casino and 50 free spins using the promo code next round. Take advantage of that. We're going to roll this for at least another week, but this is the best deal of the year. I mean, you're going to sit there at the in-laws house. You're going to be like, man, if I see one more float with Snoopy go by when I want to be watching football, I'm going to kill myself. No, don't do that. Get your phone, mybookie.ag, take advantage of that next round code, 300% deposit bonus, and have a little bit of fun there. Get you through the tough times, right? And we appreciate them so much. Also, if you guys are curious about the latest in the transfer portal, Clint's killing it over at covercrimson.com. We want you to hang out with us there as we're building the site. But this is that time of year, transfer portal coming and going. Clint's on top of that. He's done a great job of handling that. And also the number 2 early signing recruiting class. Bama ended up top behind Texas, so second in the SEC, ahead of Oregon for the number 2 recruiting class. That could change, when the whole thing's over. But excellent work by Coach DeBoer and his staff. Bama up at the top, and Clint's got breakdowns on all those guys. And also, we did a video on that, and I think it's one of Clint's best. So you want to kind of find out where a guy would fit in schematically for Alabama that just signed. Hey, go check out the video on the Cover Crimson YouTube channel where you're at right now. So like, subscribe, thumbs up, and all that kind of stuff. We got Jake Coker. We'll get his reaction to Bama being left out. We'll hear from Mike Johnson this week as well. We got, Bama and Bourbon coming up. We got a lot of great shows, and I'm curious just to hear what everyone else's reaction to the college football playoff field is. I know I was texting LT last night, and I think him and I kind of felt the same way about how disappointing the field is. To me, it just felt like a charity case. But I want to hear what everybody else thinks. You heard what we thought. And then I don't know, Clint. I mean, how excited or is anyone about these bowl games now? I think that it just lends credence to expanding the college football playoff to include most of the bowl games and I would rather have a couple teams that don't deserve to be in than to sit there and watch Boise and Arizona State get buys and get treated like they played a decent schedule over teams like Alabama, South Carolina, Miami that would kick the crap out of both of them.
Several years ago when, the Statue of Liberty play, Boise, that situation, it's like,
what year was that?
Man, I don't even know.
I'm going to look it up while you're talking about
it. But, that ended up being an incredible game. It was fun to watch. Those things happen. But Boise State fans woke up excited that morning. Oklahoma fans, they woke up. They were excited to see their team play. I don't think they were overly thrilled to be playing Boise State, to be honest with you. It wasn't the kind of, if you get a win, it's not the flex, Yeah. And I hate that that's the case, but I'm being real here. Other fan bases weren't waking up that morning and be like, man, I can't wait to watch this bowl game tonight. This is going to be incredible. A battle of the Titans. And it just, it's a pleasant surprise when those things surprise you. When you're looking at Michigan and TCU in the first round of the playoffs a couple of years ago, no one was excited about that game going in. There was not a whole lot of hype, and it ended up being incredible and such a fun watch. And it ends up being a pleasant surprise. But once again, no one woke up that morning being like, ooh, TCU's playing Michigan tonight. I can't wait to throw that game on. But when Alabama's playing Clemson or Alabama's playing Notre Dame or Georgia's playing, another big school, Oregon or whoever, you wake up that morning, and even if you're not a fan of either one of those two teams, you're hyped for that night's game. Ohio State playing Clemson. And what's unfortunate is that used to be like a bowl game problem.
Right.
It became like Georgia's having to play Baylor in a game or something, or you would get those styles of matchup and it'd be like, it's not great, but it's a bowl game. It's football to watch today.
Right.
But when it came to the real stuff, even though that people probably get upset at me for saying that, when it came to the real stuff, the college football playoff, it was the good stuff most of the time. Like I said, you had other matchups that people didn't get pumped about, but for the most part, you had good matchups. And then now the college football playoff is littered with a bunch of those styles of game that really you're just not going to, if it turns out to be an epic game and one to remember, we'll all enjoy it. We'll be happy it happened. But from a hype standpoint and getting excited and all those things, it's not there for a lot of these games. And the hope was that the college football playoff expanding, creating more of these games, we were going to be in a situation where it's like, dude, it's going to be like Christmas, man. There's good games turn around everywhere and ones that you're hyped for and everything. And, we knew that there would be at least one that maybe didn't catch as much hype because you had the group of 5 automatic qualifier. But, I was totally fine with letting those styles of team, the UCS, when they earn it, as far as doing everything they can to maybe win a national championship, position themselves to do that. We're getting one of those out of 12 always felt fine to me, but the way things are working out right now, especially now that you continue to let the automatic qualifiers happen in the Big 12 and the ACC, or especially the Big 12, considering all their good teams left.
Yeah, right.
It's like, that's where you get Arizona State. No offense to them.
Offense to them. They didn't play anybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not their fault they didn't play anybody necessarily.
Yeah. They don't deserve a bye though, Clint. I mean, Boise State lost to Oregon, and it was a good game, right? They had no other good games on their schedule. If UNLV is your best win, you don't deserve a bye in the playoff. That's just it's the SEC better dig in over this, right? They need to dig in. I get it. All these national, mouthpieces that love to talk bad about Alabama and they hate the SEC. Hey, the SEC is what drives the revenue, buddy. And when you see the TV ratings for Penn State and SMU, and you're the TV network that paid for that, you let these people take money out of your pocket. Oh yeah, I'm really excited about a bunch of games with 8+ spreads in the first round. You could have fixed that, but you're right, man. I don't know. I feel like we should leave it there for today. But again, guys, like and subscribe, thumbs up, catch us on the Cover Crimson message board. If you're as pissed off as me, get on there and sound off, because I just, maybe I'm stupid, but I'll tell you, I just didn't see this coming. I thought that the committee was going to be smarter than this, and so anyway, now we get to play Michigan in the Outback Bowl. Do you like the blooming onion, by the way?
Yeah, I like a good blooming onion. Yeah, I mean, I've I've been going to war with people for a week plus. You know, it started off kind of the Miami, South Carolina. Then you start carrying it over to the SMU. Really, you got to hammer Indiana. There's no way you can hammer SMU without hammering Indiana. And here's the thing. I mean, I feel the way that a lot of these Alabama fans feel, and I know you feel the same way. And we actually have, you know, we're fortunate enough to have platforms where we have voices that can kind of get some of these thoughts that a lot of Alabama fans are feeling, whether it be you on here, whether it be me on Twitter. And so we'll pick up those flags and we'll carry those torches for the average Alabama fan that's out there that feels the exact same way we do. And so that's exactly what we've been trying to do. We'll always be honest with you, as that is number one to us, but we will also always fight for the people who are part of our community on the message board. If you follow us, if you're a part of this channel with us, you're, you know, part of the family, we're always going to try to have your backs. And so that's what I hope people realize, that because that's where we're coming from. We love Alabama just like the average Alabama fan does, but we also love the average Alabama fan too.
Yeah, that's who we are. But I'll tell you this, it's absolutely asinine to think that your win-loss record would be the same if you played tough competition compared to if you played no competition. Like,
right.
That's the 9 committee. SEC, you better do something about it, because if I'm Alabama, I would not exclude the possibility of pulling out of the SEC and being an independent. I could get more out of it. Instead of playing a 9-game gauntlet every year and being penalized for playing NFL style competition, I could go follow SMU and some of these other scrub team conference records and have none. Be like Notre Dame. Hey, I'll schedule Navy. I'll play Army. I mean, you know, like, you know, we'll play a couple tough games sprinkled in there, and then we'll put a couple cupcakes around it just so that, you know, we get to heal up after. We don't get to heal up in the SEC. Guess what we get to do? We get to go right back into the fire the next week. And if that's not going to be taken into account, then we need to think about other options. I think the other option is going to be they're going to expand this, and they just need to put everybody in, or the SEC and the Big Ten need to break. They take about 5 or 6, 8 of the best teams with them, and forget about all these other teams.
That's what I would do. And then, like I said, what I hate about the independent route and making your schedule as easy as possible is I loved where things were heading, man. Florida State, Wisconsin. I'm not saying those are just – Florida State's a really good brand. Wisconsin, historically good brand too. But I'm like, man, you got eight SEC games. You got those 2 Power 5s. There's only room for 2, you know, Western Kentucky's or USF's or Mercer's or whatever. And so it's like, man, they can get a solid – that's 10 out of 12 weeks instead of 9 out of 12. You know, that's good. That's an increase. We're moving in the right direction. Good football every week. And then this happens, and now it's like you have positioned the SEC where they have to either take this laying down or they got to do something drastic that's going to affect their own fans and all the fans around college football. Or, you know, if you can make something happen, if they want to keep playing hardball, you take the Big Ten, you go do your own thing, and you get good football every week in that instance too. So that would be I would do that 10-1 rather than do an independent route. To be honest.
Like that, Clint. Commissioner Lamb. Let's go.
Let's do it. Let's make college football. Let's bring this product back. I mean, it's never going to return to what it was before, but man, I'm telling you, what we're doing right now, it seems like every move we're making seems like a good idea, but I feel like we're looking in hindsight and saying really every move in recent years has just made the product a lot worse on the field. We got to do something about that. I don't like where things are heading. Yeah.
Well, we're getting further and further into charity and further and further away from competition dictating. And this whole tournament, it feels like charity to me. It feels like participation trophies. Sorry.
I cannot disagree. I think that's a good way to put it, man.
I'll leave it there. Like, subscribe, comment section, cover Crimson, YouTube. Roll Tide, everybody.